So it says like this, 4 lines, top of the page 70. V'Sarai Eshes Avram lo yoldalo. Sarai, Avram's wife, did not bear a child for him. V'lo shivcha mitzris u'shma Hagar. She's got an Egyptian maidservant. Her name is Hagar. Now the Medrash says that this Hagar was the daughter of Paro. She was an Egyptian princess. And when Paro saw the miracles that happened to Avram Avinu, he said, better my daughter should be a maidservant to this man than she should be a princess in the Egyptian palace. So he gives them Hagar as a maidservant. So Sarah does not have children. So now she comes along and does something which requires an explanation. Vatomer Sarai el Avram. She says to her husband, Hineno atzarani Hashem miledes. Hashem has prevented me from bearing children. Bona el shifchasi. Marry my maidservant. Ulai ibona mimena. Perhaps I will become built as a result of her. In other words, I will have children. Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. And Avram obeys her. Avram said, okay. She says, marry my maidservant. Now, the page 70. The question here, the first question is, how is Sarah Imenu going to benefit by her husband having the maidservant marrying a second wife? One of the Rabbi Hirsch says, what Sarah Imenu understood was, listen, if they're going to have the Jewish people, what Hagar will produce the physical body, then Sarah Imenu could raise him as a child and instill in him the values and everything else that you would instill in her own child. That's one of the approaches. The other approach here is that Sarah Imenu feels, look, I don't have children, but just because I don't have children doesn't mean my husband has to suffer, so let him have a child. In other words, up until now, Sarah thought that she doesn't know why don't they have children? Is it because of her? Is it because of Avram Avinu? But after the promise of the Bris Ben Abisarim, where God says to Avram Avinu, you're going to have children, so Sarah Imenu understands, okay, Avram could have children. Now maybe obviously the problem is me, because he never promised me. The problem is my husband. There's some commentators say she knew about the promise, some say, but assuming she knew about the promise, so just because I can't have children doesn't mean he shouldn't have children. I'll give him the opportunity, which obviously is a woman. For a woman is very painful. For a woman, do you know what a co-wife is called in halacha? You know what a mother-in-law is chamoto, father-in-law is chotano, right? There are words for it. A sister-in-law, a brother-in-law, there's a name, what we even call a brother-in-law, sister-in-law, mother-in-law. What's a co-wife called? What's a co-wife called? This is my mother-in-law, this is my sister-in-law. Now, how would a woman say this is my co-wife? What's that? Concubine? Concubine is the husband. No, concubine means for the husband. She is a concubine, means she's a like a spouse, but not quite spouse status. But if I'm one wife and I want to say I could point to my husband's sister and I would say that's my sister-in-law, right? Point to my husband's mother and say that's my mother-in-law. What would I call my co-wife? Your co-spouse, right? But there is the word in Hebrew for it is the tzara. What's a tzara? That's my trouble. That's my trouble-in-law. No. The mistress is the husband. That's from the husband's point of view. I'm talking about the two wives. How do they refer to each other? That's my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law. That's my trouble-in-law, right? That's my trouble and my tzara. The word for Hebrew, she is a tzara. That's the official name. This is my kala. My daughter-in-law is my kala. My co-wife is my tzara because obviously two wives are obviously at each other's, they're not happy with each other. They're competing for the same husband. And therefore, Sarah Imenu says, look, it's not something that's easy for her. She should marry 90 years, 80 years, whatever it is at this time. So I'll bring in a wife, which is painful for me, and I'm doing it as a sacrifice for my husband so he should have children. And perhaps in the merit of my sacrificing for the good of my husband, then God will see my pain and give me a child. And therefore, the idea over here is that I'll have the child through the sacrifice. By allowing my husband to have children, maybe that'll be a merit for me. The other approach is your approach. You said that it's what do you call it? That she'll educate the child. Okay, that's where it begins. So the next question is, later on we're going to find that after this child is born, who turns out to be whom? Who is this child? Ishmael. We're going to see later on that when Sarah Imenu says, throw him out of the house, the Torah says, Avram Avinu wasn't happy about it. And then God comes to Avram Avinu later and says, okay, obey her. So why over here where Sarah Imenu says to do something which is a little off the beaten track, and Avram Avinu just, okay, if she said so, I have to do it. So why is it that Avram Avinu, here he's willing to listen, yet later on when Sarah says something having to do with Hagar and Yishmael, Avram Avinu says, I don't know, it doesn't sound so good to me. And then God has to intervene and say, obey Sarah because of her Ruach HaKodesh. My mother used to always say this, use that pasuk to me. It's a pasuk later on. It says, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shma bekola. Rashi says, she's got the Ruach HaKodesh. Right, so my mother used to say to me, see, the women have the Ruach HaKodesh. I said, yeah, but Mom, the Torah only writes the exception. Right, that was always how the argument went. Then last laugh, she got the last laugh because my wife's name is Sarah, so I got to obey. So the what do you call it? So over here the Torah comes along and the Torah says, why over here he listens so quickly? And later on he's a little more hesitant. So one of the Mefarshim says, very interesting. You see, later on, you always have to suspect what's motivating somebody. Whenever you're positively motivated, where it's in your own best interest, you always got to suspect motivation. Here, it's against her best interests. So Avraham Avinu said, well, this must be the will of God because it's not something that she would really want. It's not in her best interest over here. In other words, it's something painful. Whereas later on, where she says, throw the bum out, because Yitzchak is born, and already Yitzchak is born, and Yisrael, throw the bum out. Well, that's good. That's what you really am. There I need a command from God to make sure to ratify that. And that's, by the way, a rule in life. I don't say it's 100% rule, but it's always a very, very, it's a pretty good measure. Sometimes we have a conflict in what we want to do, and I'm talking about what we want to do when we want to do something good, when we want to do a mitzvah. When we want a conflict to do something bad, of course he can't do something bad. But let's say you have a conflict. Let's say you're sitting and learning Torah. And then somebody suggests, you know what, let's go do a mitzvah. Let's go downtown and try to find people and recruit them for the yeshiva. Which one should you do? Which one should you do? The general rule is that the thing that you want to do less, is really the thing that you should do. In other words, if you feel that you want to, what do you call it? What I really want to do is go downtown, because that's a lot more fun. Going downtown and recruiting people, or going downtown and doing mitzvahs over there, that's a lot more fun than learning Torah. That's probably the one you shouldn't do. The one that you generally don't want to do is the one, if a man has to go to shul in the morning, right? And his wife says to him, can you do me a favor, stay home and help take care of the kids? I have a fever, I don't feel well. It happens. Which one should you do? So if you're really excited about staying home, you should probably go on a shul. And if you're really excited about getting out of the house, right, and when your wife needs help, they probably stay home. Because the Yetzer Hara, very rarely are the mitzvahs like something like we really want to do. So if you ever feel that you want, so Avraham Avinu says, look, she's telling me to marry Hagar, and I know she doesn't want me to marry Hagar. She obviously doesn't want me to. It's very painful for her. I guess that this is Ruach HaKodesh. But later on, where she says, throw Yishmael out of the house, which is something she wants, then I got to get her ratified, because otherwise she's got what we call a bias over here. So Sarah Imenu goes and she gives him Hagar as a full wife. She wants Hagar to be a full wife out of honor of Avraham Avinu. I don't want you to take her as a maidservant. I want you to have her as a wife, because a man like you doesn't have maidservants. You have a wife. And this is all very painful for Sarah Imenu. Okay, Hagar gets pregnant right away. And when she gets pregnant right away, so the commentary says she starts taking her boss, Sarah Imenu, she takes her lightly. Now take a look at Pasuk Daled. Vayovo el Hagar, he marries Hagar. It's about 9 lines to the top of the page. Vatahar, she becomes pregnant. And gentlemen, remember I told you the word Vatahar has contained in the word Vatahar. She became pregnant, the word Har, which means what? A mountain, yeah, because a woman who gets pregnant becomes mountainous. Right? Listen, I'm not making this up. I'm telling you what the commentators say. A woman who gets pregnant, you're laughing. Just wait. Ask the women; they don't think it's so funny. You know, you're walking around with a little Jiffy Pop over there, right? Vatar. She becomes pregnant. Vatera ki harasa, and Hagar sees she became pregnant. Vatekal givirta be'eineha. Her mistress, meaning in this case mistress, her boss, the woman in charge of her, she starts taking her a little lightly. Then Rashi says, Hagar thought, I guess Sarah's not the tzaddikus we all thought she was. Everybody thought she's such a tzaddikus, she's such a righteous woman. She's been living with the man 75 years and never got pregnant. I lived with him once and all of a sudden I'm pregnant. I guess Sarah's not. And Sarah sees, Vatekal gevirta be'eneha. She sees that she's not looking at her. She doesn't have the same respect for her. She doesn't take the boss's, she thinks she's walking around with she's got a bit of a swagger here. Right? And the commentaries say it's be'eneha. She did not treat Sarah any differently except be'eneha, just the look in her eye. And sometimes you can say she's got that look, she's gloating, what we call gloating. And you're gloating. You win a game, and then the guys will stop gloating. I'm doing anything. You got that look, you just got that look like you. And so Sarah starts to oppress her, and Hagar runs away. Now, here, gentlemen, we'll take a little look at what we're going through today, and this will explain the entire package for you. Look at the bottom, look at the last 2 lines on the page. 3 lines on the page. She goes out to the desert. She runs away. Vayomer lo malach Hashem, the angel of Hashem, 3 lines to the bottom, page 70. Hinoch hora v'yaladet ben. How does the art scroll translate hinoch hora? You will conceive. According to some, she conceived and she lost the first baby. She will conceive. Or hinoch hora could be, behold, you are pregnant. V'yaladet ben. Pay attention carefully. V'karas shemo Yishmael. You will name him Yishmael. Ki shama Hashem es el onyech. Hashem has heard your suffering. So here we have what is often referred to nowadays as our cousins, right? Our cousins. They're not really our cousins, by the way. They're not really our cousins. They're more half brothers than cousins. If a man is married and has a child, then he marries and has another child. He gets married as a child, has Reuven. And Reuven's mother then dies. The man marries another woman. Now he has a son, Shimon. What is the relationship between Reuven and Shimon? They're half brothers. They're not cousins. They're not our cousins. They're closer than cousins. They're half brothers.
It goes a long way.
All right?
It goes a long way.
What goes a long way?
Like 2 generations, right?
Yeah, right. Well, okay, yeah, it goes a long way, but we're half brothers a long way. Okay, now listen carefully. What is the name of Yishmael? What is the name of Yishmael? So the Torah says Hashem has heard your cry. Yishma Kel. God has heard. So the Medrash says, you know why they're called Yishmael? Yishmael is because in the end of days, they are going to torment the Jewish people. Whoever the descendants of Yishmael are, they will torment the Jewish people. The Jewish people will then cry out to Hashem, and Hashem will listen, and that will bring the redemption. Yishmael, his name is because of what we're going to do. That's what the Medrash says. The Medrash says that he's going to cry, he's going to torture us, he's going to torment us, and the redemption is going to be not through the United Nations, and it's not going to be through military might. It doesn't say that. It says Yishmael, and the general. Listen, nowadays there's very little you can do militarily. What can you do militarily? What can you do about a guy gets into a truck and decides to run down 75 people? What can you possibly do? There's nothing you can do militarily. You got a ragtag bunch of terrorists and the greatest armies in the world. There's nothing they can do about it. Okay, so you control them here, you bomb them there. And if one Meshuggah decides to get into a car and go running down people, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. What can you possibly do? One guy pulls out a knife, starts stabbing people. Nothing you can do about it. Where will the ultimate Yeshua come with the redemption? Yishma Kel, that we will cry out and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will listen to us. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you something absolutely remarkable. Absolutely. I remember every time I saw this from Rav Hirsch says this, I actually got the goosebumps. I think the first time and it wasn't a cold room either. I got the goosebumps when I saw this the first time, and when you hear it, it rings so true that you can't. You're just like, wow. Okay, take a look. V'hu pera adam. He will be. The Art Scroll translates it. To read the Art Scroll's translation on the bottom line, he will be a wild ass of a man. Yodo bakol v'yad kolbo. His hand will be on everybody, and everybody's hand will be on him. Ve'al pnei kol echav yipol. He will yishkon. He will dwell around over all. He translates it as over. There are going to be a lot of him. Now take a look at Rashi first. Take a look at Rashi. Left column, bottom line. Left column, 3 lines from the bottom. 3 lines from the bottom. Left column, if you find it, please show the person next to you. Left column of Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. He says, Pera Adam. What's a Pera Adam? Ohev midbaros, he likes the deserts, lotzud chayos, to go hunting animals. Kemoshe Kosov Vayeshev Bamidbar V'Yoroka Kashos. It says later on he dwelled in the desert and he was an archer. Then the bottom line says Yodo Bakol. What does it mean? His hands on everybody. Listim. He could be a thief. V'Yad Kolbo Hakol Sonim Oso. Everybody hates him. Umis Gorimbo. Okay. So there's a description of whoever this Ishmael is, that he's going to be a thief. He's going to be a bandit. Hold on, question for a few minutes. He's going to be a thief. He's going to be a bandit, and everybody's going to hate him. Okay, now I want you to look at Targum Onkelos. Targum Onkelos is in the left column. It's right opposite the Chumash. In the block print, 3 lines from the bottom in Onkelos. Everybody see that? That's the Aramaic translation. Vihu Yehe. You see Pasuk Yud Beis? Everybody see? If you see it, please show the person next to you. If you find it, did everybody find it in the Onkelos? On page 70. Page 70 in the Onkelos. Pasuk Yud Beis. Listen what Onkelos says here. V'hu yehei morod be'enosha. He will be the rebellious one in mankind. Hu yehei tzrich lechoila. He will need everybody. V'dad kol b'nei enosha yon tzrich elei. And everybody's going to need him. What does that sound like, gentlemen? Yishmael's going to need everybody, and everybody's going to need him. What does that sound like?
You will need his petrol.
Yeah, I think so. Isn't that interesting? And he needs basically everything else. Right? They got the oil. Everybody needs them. Everybody hates them, but everybody needs them. Right? You can't live with them. You can't live without them. Right? And they need everything. They need mankind. They need, what have they got? What do they produce? They don't produce anything. It's all imported. You know, we need it. We need them. Right? Dominate the world because of the petrol. Right? Because of the oil. They got the oil. Okay. Now, 1 second. What's okay? Okay. Oh, well, just hold for a second. It's right. Everything's changing, but at the end of the day, they're needed far out of proportion to what we want to need them. Bottom line is they're still needed far out of proportion. Whether it's they call that fracking or whatever it is, whatever they're trying to produce. Bottom line is we need them a lot more than we really want to need them. That dominates all the decisions made based on all the countries in the world. Nobody cares what happens. Nobody cares what happens in countries where there's no oil. The only time all of a sudden everybody's humanitarian concerns because of oil. And that's what the humanitarian concern says. Rashi, oil. Right. That's what everybody's concerned about. 1 second. In English, how do you describe somebody, if you want to describe anybody in any way, what comes first, the noun or the adjective? In English, what comes first, the noun or the adjective? Adjective. He's a big man, he's a good man, he's a nice man. In Hebrew, what comes first, the noun or the adjective? Huh? The noun comes first, right? Adam Gadol, Adam Yafeh, Adam Tov, right? Now, if you want to describe, without looking in the Chumashim, gentlemen, if you want to describe a wild man in Hebrew, what would you call him? Adam Pereh, right? You would call him an Adam Pereh, the noun and then the adjective. Look how he's described over here. V'hu yeh Pereh Adam. He will be, it's the opposite, it should say Adam Pereh. He will be a Pereh Adam. Isn't that interesting? You know what Rav Hirsch says? This follows the rules of Hebrew grammar. The noun comes first. You know what he is? He is a pereh. He is a wild. We don't have a word for that in English. But that's what he is. He is a wild. What kind of wild? Adjective. A human. Wild. But that's only a description. It's only a description. In other words, the essence is not, it's not a human being who's out of control. He's not a human being who is out of control. He is, by definition, out of control. He's an OOC. What kind of out of control? Well, it could be followed by tiger. It could be followed by leopard. It could be followed by polar bear. It's not. It's followed by human. That means everything about him looks like a human being, doesn't it? You know, we know better than anybody else because we're the ones on the receiving end. Anybody who lives there understands, and now the whole world understands it. We're talking about something that cannot be controlled. This was one of the problems. I try not to get political. I'm more educational than political. I'm not looking at this from a political point of view. I'm just trying to explain to you, this is one of the big problems that the Americans have always had, the Westerners have always had when they've been criticizing Israel. They said, why don't you sit down at a table and negotiate with them? Just sit down and negotiate. Why? Because they're starting with an assumption Their assumption is everyone in the world could be negotiated with. Just sit down and work out a reasonable conclusion. Just sit down and negotiate. And what they don't understand, is it warm in here, by the way? It is a little bit warm, isn't it? Maybe we should turn on the air conditioning. Maybe we'll put on the what do you call it? Yeah, hit the button. Thanks. Their assumption is well, let's sit down and negotiate the way all standard civilized countries negotiate. Let's just work a treaty, work out a negotiation. What they don't understand is they don't play by those rules. That's what Rav Hirsch says. Rav Hirsch says a para adam means he doesn't obey the societal norms. Look, no country is perfect. The Germans were also, just the Gemütlichkeit Germans who were all polite and nice and so everything was the rules. Then they turned into murderers. But at the end of the day, there is a certain basic living of a society. Take a look at the neighborhoods in Israel. You could tell when it's a Jewish neighborhood, when it's a Yishmael neighborhood. There's no structure there. There's no structure. There's a house. There's nothing that is uniform. And not only that you get to the Bedouins. The Bedouins do not live in a society as we understand a society. They move from place to place. They don't have societal structure. I'm not saying any of this, by the way. This is all Rabbi Hirsch. That's what it means that he's a para adam. He doesn't obey the restraints and rules that are generally agreed upon in a society. So what happens is people understand, hey, look, you got a problem over here because you got these people. Sit down and negotiate with them. But you can't negotiate with somebody who doesn't want to be negotiated with. So what's his name? Yasser Arafat, should rest in pieces. He was, when they went to the White House and he met with Clinton and Ehud Barak, they offered him 99% of what he wanted. And he got up and he said no. And Clinton was like, what just happened here? How can he have said no? Because he's starting out with a given. His given is that the guy obviously wants to reach a solution. And what he doesn't understand is why in the world would he want to reach a solution? He's living like a king when there's no solution. Why would he want a solution? It's not going to be better for him on a personal level, so why would he want to put an end to the conflict? You understand? And therefore, the entire essence is an essence of he's out of control. He happens to be. He's got 2 eyes, 2 ears. He looks very much like a human being. But when you break it down, you see that this is not something that can be dealt with. That's what it means by a para adam. That's what we're suffering with to this day. Okay. Now, turn to page 72. Vayi Avram ben Tishim Shana v'Teisha Shanim. Avram is 99 years old. Vayera Hashem el Avram vayomer elav ani kel shakai hisalech lefanei v'heyei samim. I am kel shakai. I want you to go before me and be perfect. Now, ve'etzna berisi b'ni u'veinecha. I will make my covenant between me and you. Va'arbe oscha b'mavmod. I will increase you very much. So over here, Avram Avinu is going to get the command of bris milah, and God says to him that we're going to change your name, and then he comes in Pasuk Yud, I think, and he says to him, and on Pasuk, top of page 74. So Vayomer Elokim el Avram v'atah brisi tishmor, maintain my covenant, v'atah v'zorecha achecha lo you and all your offspring. Zos brisi asher tishmu b'eidu v'necha v'zorecha achecha himolachem kol zachar. Every male has to be circumcised. And the fact that he says every male has to be circumcised, that's where we learn that where bris milah is done. Every male has to be circumcised. Unimaltem es basar laschem, you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. V'haya laos bris beinu v'nechem. Ben shmona uven shmona asimim yimolchem kol zochar l'dorsechem. 8 years old, you should have the bris. Okay, what is bris milah all about? What is bris milah all about? Kosh Baruch comes to Avram Avinu, and it's only after the bris. Remember, Yishmael is born. 13 years later, Yishmael has a bris. Their commentators say that that's one of the merits of the Yishmael. To this day, they do a circumcision, not quite the way we do it with all the halachic details, but they also circumcise, and that is one of the merits that they have. And then Avram Avinu is told that all Jews from the 8th day, you, Avram Avinu, at 99 have to be circumcised, and then every Jewish male at 8 days old has to be circumcised. What's going on with bris milah? This is one of a mitzvah that Jews do to this day. Even Jews who are far detached from Judaism, they maintain bris milah. Jews even the farthest removed maintain bris milah. So what's really contained in bris milah? Number one is the idea that in order to become bris milah, by the way, a Jew is considered not perfect until he has a bris milah. The bris milah is perfect. We are born with a flaw. As a matter of fact, in the Israeli army, the only one, see, the Israeli army not being a halachic, not operating from a halachic point of view, a Jewish soldier loses 3 points on his physical profile if he's had a bris milah. The Druze Arabs, the Christian Arabs who are in the Israeli army, so they could get 100 on their because they haven't been circumcised, the Christian Arabs. But the Israeli soldiers, any Israeli soldier who's been circumcised, which is all of them, automatically can only get 97% on their profile because it's not a halachic army. Our view is the opposite. A soldier who has not had a bris milah has a flaw. If you've had a bris milah, then you are perfected as a Jew. That is the Torah opinion. Now, what's going on here? What's the idea of having a bris milah as a form of perfection? Why do we need a bris milah as a form of perfection? So one of the commentaries that points out, the bris milah hurts a little bit. Not a lot, but it hurts a little bit. Remarkably, there's a vitamin in the body responsible for clotting, which is vitamin K. And that vitamin reaches peak levels on the 8th day. It's an interesting little coincidence, yeah? Vitamin reaches peak levels on the 8th day, number one. Number two, the bris milah does hurt the baby a little bit, nowhere near as much as it would hurt an adult who has a fully developed senses. It would be much more painful. People who have had to have a bris milah later in life, when the Russians first came over from the Soviet Union, so many of them didn't have any bris milah at all. They had it's a full-fledged surgery. Nowadays, anybody who has had a bris milah, the bris milah has to be done. It has 2 requirements. It's got to be on the 8th day or later. In other words, it has to be on the 8th day, but for whatever reason it didn't take place, so then it has to be done later. If a baby isn't well, so they'll postpone the bris milah indefinitely till the baby is strong enough to handle the bris. Problem is that in the hospitals they do circumcision, sometimes they do it before the 8th day. So then somebody later on in life discovers that there's a halachic requirement, so they do what's called hatafas dam bris. Can't do a full circumcision, there's nothing circumcised, but hatafas dam bris means they draw some blood from that area. It's relatively painless. They draw some blood from that area in order to fulfill what's called hatafas dam bris. They also do that with a baby born circumcised. I think 1 out of 1,000 babies are born circumcised, meaning that the foreskin hasn't developed, so they have to do what's called hatafas dam bris, where they just draw a little bit of blood in order to fulfill the mitzvah, of the bris milah. Now, so number one, and number two, the circumciser has to be a Shabbos observant man. If it's a doctor in the hospital, then it's not a valid circumcision. And again, a hatafas dam is needed. You got to do some bloodletting. So the bris milah does hurt a little bit. It does hurt the baby. A baby cries, but it's nowhere near as what it would be for adult. Now, one of the commentaries points out the idea here is that since the baby is not perfect, he is now entering the bris, and the bris is entered through a little bit of pain. The lesson for us is that perfection of character, the same way that physical perfection involves a little bit of pain, similarly, perfection of character may involve a little bit of pain. That means that a Torah Jew sometimes has to take on certain challenges and ordeals in order to reach physical perfection. It doesn't happen by itself, and therefore the idea of the bris milah is to try to communicate the idea that there has to be a certain amount of physical discomfort, which is symbol of the sacrifice that a person has to make in order to achieve spiritual perfection. Anytime you have to do something difficult, you're achieving some degree of perfection, and it's coming about through a certain amount of pain. Number one. Number two, the idea of the bris milah is that it's on the 8th day. Now, it's on the 8th day. So everybody knows the number 8 is the number that goes beyond nature, that you're familiar with. Have you ever heard that concept? The natural world is 7, because the world was created in 7 days, 6 days plus Shabbos, and the number 8 always represents the dimension which is beyond nature. It's like Hanukkah is 8 candles. A miracle is always associated with the number 8. So what happens here is the baby, God comes out of and says, okay, you have the bris milah on the 8th day. So why? What's bris milah got to do with the number 8? Okay, now I once gave an example. Imagine, how many of you are, if you're familiar with American sports, sports is reality, so we have to use that as the example. You're familiar with the NCAA tournament, right? Okay. Now, what would your reaction be if I would tell you there's 64 teams enter the NCAA college basketball tournament, and I would tell you the following: pick one team. You get to pick one team, and I'll take the field. Which is a safer bet? I would take the field, because in the NCAA, especially where it's very unpredictable, go to the baseball playoffs. You take one team, and I'll take the rest of I'll take the field. It's very unpredictable, right? Now, comes along anybody. Listen, I'll always take the field, because on all sports it's basically unpredictable. It's basically you're always better off taking the field than the one team. Okay, now imagine you're Avram Avinu, and God comes over to you and shows you prophetically what the Jewish people are going to have to endure and survive through history. You got to survive the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the Chmielnicki massacres, the Holocaust, the First World War, the Second World War. You're going to have to survive that. All those enemies. Now, if you were a betting man around at the time of Avram Avinu, what would you bet on? That the Jews are going to make it, or they're going to? Would you take the Jews, or you take the field? I definitely take the field. By the natural running of the world, the Jews are going to be decimated very early on. So what does God do? Comes to Avram Avinu and says, "Listen, your children are going to survive, and they're going to survive beyond nature. That's the only way we could survive." How does that? What's the sign? Because the organ of reproduction is going to have the number on the 8th day, the organ of reproduction. I'm making a covenant with you. That's my promise. Your descendants, symbolized by reproduction and being done on the 8th day, that's my promise that you're going to survive beyond nature, lamala min hateva. Beyond nature, you're going to survive all of your enemies. And therefore, the bris milah is specifically done on the 8th day, and that's how we survive. Now, even more than that, who's the first Jew that's born after Avram Avinu has a bris milah? Who's born? Yitzchak. What is Yitzchak's, they talk about each one of the avos has a certain midah, a certain characteristic that he represents. What was Avram Avinu? Chesed. What was Yitzchak?
Judgment.
Din, strict judgment. What's Yaakov? Truth. Emes. Okay. Yitzchak is din. What does his name mean? Laughter. It actually means Yitzchak is actually a future tense. He will laugh, right? Whatever it is, laughter or will laugh, ha ha. Right? That's not what I would name the person of din. Strict justice, I would call him stern, not Yitzchak. Right? Why are you being called Yitzchak? Laughter. What's laughter got to do with any of this? Number one. Number two, why is he only fathered by Avram Avinu after Avram Avinu has the bris milah? And number three, who's he born to? Sarah Imenu. According to one opinion, not only she was barren, she couldn't have children. She's beyond the childbearing years, and according to one opinion, she doesn't even have a womb. A baby is normally carried for 9 months. He has free womb and board, right? But Sarah Imenu doesn't even have a womb, and yet Yitzchak is born. You know why? Because Yitzchak on both sides has that quality of being beyond nature. Avram Avinu has bris milah, which represents that we are supervised by God, we transcend nature. And he's born to a mother of absolutely miraculous birth, where by natural law she can't have a child. That means it's in his genes. It's spiritual genetics. It's in the genes of Yitzchak that the Jewish people are going to survive. That's why it's called laughter. You know when you laugh? When do you laugh in life? When do you laugh? When something is it's a surprise. It's a shock. It's absurd. If you see a man, dressed to the T, beautiful 3-piece suit, gold cufflinks, just walking along. All of a sudden he slips. He wipes out on a banana peel. Right? You laugh, right? You laugh. It's funny. Why is it funny? A guy fell on a banana peel. Why is it funny? Because it's so unexpected. It's just so it's completely absurd. That's why you laugh. Did you, in high school, you never had a teacher sat down on the chair and the chair collapsed? Usually you set it up that way, right? You set it up. The teacher comes in and the teacher collapses. And Mr. Fogel, I didn't think you had it in you. And the teacher collapses, right, on the chair. And everybody laughs. Ha ha. Why? You set it up. Yeah, but it's still for a teacher to fall off. If you fell off a chair, your friend fell off a chair, right? When somebody does something ridiculous, completely, that's why it's called a punchline. When you told it, it completely took you by surprise. That's why Yitzchak's entire existence is something it's ridiculous. He shouldn't have ever been born. That's the Jewish people, Yitzchak, because it's future tense. The whole survival of the Jewish people is a joke. It's a joke. We shouldn't even be here. Should have been decimated long ago by natural law. So what does that Kodesh Baruch Hu says? No, you're going to survive. That's why people always ask, how could a Holocaust have happened? What a profound philosophical question. How could the Holocaust have happened? You know what our attitude is? By natural law? How could a Holocaust have not happened? The whole world hates you. They're bound to wipe you out. It's not how could a Holocaust have happened. It's the very fact that Holocausts didn't happen more often that proves that the Jewish people are supervised by Kodesh Baruch Hu. The fact that everybody who survived the Holocaust, just ask them, how did you survive? You're going to get one story after another, which doesn't make any sense for anybody who ever survived the Holocaust. The whole story doesn't make sense. This one says, I faced death 20 times and I got out of it each time. Doesn't make any sense. The odds are against you. That a person understands that we're not governed by the odds, because the odds are badly stacked against us. That's what the Bris Milah represents. Bris Milah represents that the Jewish people are going to survive, and they're going to survive in the way what we call lemala min hatema. We're going to transcend nature. Okay, that's the idea of the Bris Milah on the 8th day. Now, anybody who's not had, or you question whether you don't know whether or not you've had a valid Bris Milah, you should speak to one of the rabbis here, Rabbi Samet or any of the Rabbanim here, and find out if whether or not you may need to have Hatafas Dam Bris. And Hatafas Dam Bris, again, is relatively painless, but Hatafas Dam Bris may need to be done. A child, nowadays the Moels are very well trained, and a child, you see, the Bris Milah itself is a little bit of stress on the parents. You're taking an 8-day-old child, a little ooey-gooey baby, and the mother has this little baby. She is her hormones are completely out of whack. She's very emotional. She's in pain. Then you take this little boy, you hand him over to a group of rabbis, with beards, one of them has a knife in his hand, and they whisk the baby off. That's rough on the mother. Now they take this is, however, the Mefarshim say, this is as close as we get to human sacrifice. Jews do not engage in human sacrifice. This is as close as we get. And what happens is when you do the Bris Milah, there's the sandik. The sandik is the man who holds the baby. The moel will generally tell the father, if the moel, the father's attitude should be, the baby is a sacrifice, and the lap of the moel is the altar. And you're putting the baby on the altar, and they do the Bris Milah. The Bris Milah takes about 10 seconds, very quick. Theoretically, I got to be careful what I say now. Theoretically, you see, the mitzvah is on the father. It's your mitzvah. When it's your child, you have to get him circumcised. Theoretically, if you knew how to handle the knife and you were rebellious, you should do the mitzvah, because there's a principle in Torah, mitzvah bo yoser maybe shlucho. It's always a bigger mitzvah for you than through your agent. But since we are not trained in doing Bris Milah, so then what the moel does is the moel hands the father the knife, and the father then hands the knife back to the moel, and when you hand it to the moel, you say, with this, by handing you the knife, I am making you an agent to circumcise my son. We do not do it. The moel, you need a specially trained moel to do it. However, I do know fathers who are involved in at least the first cut. The moel is there, there's a shield that they use. There's a shield, and the father makes the first cut, and then the moel finishes off, because the father wants to be physically involved in the mitzvah. I definitely recommend against it. Do another mitzvah, gentlemen. Right? Find if you really want to get involved in a mitzvah, hands-on, open up a baba kama with your own hands. I definitely recommend it. It's not, and I myself, when there's a bris, I'm the farthest guy. I'm the guy in the back of the room. I'm just kind of sitting there like this. I actually was a sandik a couple of times. The last time I was a sandik for my grandson. And from the minute the moel starts taking out his equipment, I'm already getting queasy. Like, oh, that's a real knife, and I'm starting to get queasy. And then when he brings the baby in, as soon as he takes off the baby's diaper, I already have my eyes closed, right, like this. And you hold the baby, kind of loop your hands around the baby's legs, and then let the moel do his work. And I keep my eyes well closed from beginning to end until I know it's safe to open them. And until the mold starts taking, he says, okay, you can let him go now. Right, and then he takes the baby away. So last time I said to the mole, I was pretty good, yeah. And I says, oh yeah, you're just superb, because he saw me with my eyes tightly closed. And what do you call it? It's we had a guy here once at Or Sameach. I have a friend who's a Rav who's a moil. So we had a bris in my neighborhood, and some of the guys I don't know why the guys were there. Maybe the bris was here. I don't remember. We had a guy. No, the bris was actually here. And I had a guy here, a student who was a pre-med doing volunteer work in a New York hospital emergency room. So you can imagine the good things he's seen there. And they did the bris, and when they did the bris, he passed out. So the moles from my neighborhood, so I spoke to them all afterwards. I said, that guy who passed out today is actually pre-med, and he's in an emergency room. So the moles started laughing. So he said, what happened? He said he went home, and his wife asked him if everything went okay at the bris. And he said, yeah, why not? And she pointed, he had some blood on his collar. So he said what had happened was that sometimes, once in a while, you get the spurting. The blood spurts a little more than at other times. And at this one, he said, he said, well, the blood spurted out. And when I asked the guy what happened, he said to me, well, there's a little bit more blood than I expected to see, right? So you better know, being a bris milah is not for everybody. Being a moil is not for everybody. But the mitzvah is on the father to have his son circumcised. And anybody who's not been circumcised by the time they're 13 years old, the responsibility then transfers to them to get themselves circumcised. If you've had a bris milah, or if you don't know if the bris milah was done by a shomer Shabbos moel, or was done before the 8th day, then you should contact somebody because you may need to have a what's called a hatafas dam bris. Okay, all right, we'll continue tomorrow.